Hello, everybody. This is Matt with Provider Trust. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you may be joining us today. I want to start by saying thank you so much for choosing to spend your hour with us. We really value your time and know that your time is valuable to you. So thank you for choosing to spend this hour with us today. I'm very, excuse me, very excited to introduce you guys to today's presenters. One you will recognize if you've been here before, one you will not. So Jody Murphy is our Director of People Operations, and I cannot think of a better person to speak on this webinar. She will be with Mike Rosen, our co-founder, who you guys may recognize from webinars in the past. But Jody puts her heart into this company every day, and it shows in the smiles on everyone's faces and just the amount of work that she puts into the culture here at Provider Trust and the recruitment of hiring the best in Nashville is really, we are so blessed to have her, and we are so happy to have her on today's webinar to present on a topic that she knows very well. So today's presentation is how top HR teams focus on culture by developing and empowering people. So a couple notes before we really get into it here. You will all receive a copy of the slides this afternoon, as well as a link to the recording of today's session, so you guys can share it with your teams or whoever you like to share it with. And our CEUs for this webinar, I know that really caters more to the compliance audience today, but those are pending, and we fully expect those to be approved. And as soon as I get those, just like last webinar, you will all receive those. So just a couple notes there, and I'll introduce us a little bit if you're not familiar with Provider Trust. So we're a software as a service company here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we work with compliance folks, HR folks in particular, and people at large health systems, health plans, really the healthcare industry in general, and all their needs when monitoring and verifying their populations. So that's just a little bit about us. We truly believe that a smarter healthcare makes a safer healthcare. And we fulfill this by monitoring healthcare populations to identify compliance and credentialing issues before they impact patients. So we are very people focused here at Provider Trust, and we're proud to have this as our statement. So these webinars, if this is your first one, welcome again, and thank you again for being here. But something at Provider Trust that we are passionate about is helping others grow and succeed. That is a core value of our company, and we live that out every day with a lot of the work that Jody does, and really the work that everyone does here. But helping others grow and succeed is important to us, so we are happy to share these webinars for credit, and just we're happy that you're joining us. We want everyone to learn together and grow together in this industry as it is ever changing. But after the webinar today, you will receive a survey. So we really put a lot of value into your all's responses. So please just, there's a section in there where you can recommend any topics that you would like to learn more about, and that we're really interested in what you guys have to share. We want to make sure that these continue to bring value to you and are relevant for you and your role at your organization. So that is a little bit about why we're doing this. Our upcoming webinars for you guys, again, you'll receive the copy of the slides here, but what to expect over the next couple months. We'll also have a webinar in December that I'll share with you guys as well. But October 16th, we are covering the new CMS authorities announcement, which is relevant to everyone on this call, and we're excited to share that. Then in November, we will be talking a little bit about exclusion monitoring and how health plans can use that to protect their provider networks and control recruitment costs. And then November 27th, we'll get back to our HR and compliance folks specifically and talk a little bit about how those departments can collaborate and make 2020 just a great year for your organization. So we're excited for those webinars coming up. Those will all be available on our site, and you can sign up for those just like you signed up for this one. So you will be receiving invitations from me. So just look out for those and sign up if you're interested. So with that, I'll run over today's agenda. So Jody's going to kick us off with defining your culture, and then followed by focus on engagement and retention. Then we'll talk a little bit about roadmaps for personal development, and finally we will kind of recap with some key takeaways from today's presentation for you to share with your team. So that's enough. That's enough for me, and thanks for listening. With that, I will hand it over to Jody.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for being on. This is my inaugural PT Provider Trust webinar, and I'm just thrilled to be here and talk about a topic that's quite near and dear to my heart. So that said, we're going to jump in, and we have a lot of material to get through, so bear with us as we move potentially swiftly through this information, because we want you all to have the full scope of how we do culture at PT. First and foremost, we wanted to start off by just talking about how do you define your culture. To us at Provider Trust, culture is the character and it's the personality of our organization. It's really what sets us apart. It's the makeup of your organization's values. It's your mission. It's your mission statement. Kind of the ethos of how you go about your day-to-day in this workplace. I absolutely loved this quote from Brian Chesky, who's the Airbnb CEO. He says, culture is 1,000 things 1,000 times. It's living the core values when you hire, when you write an email, when you're working on a project, and when you're simply walking in the hall. For Provider Trust, our culture is people first and value centric. We as a team aim to champion and live out our values every day in the decisions that we make and the attitude that we bring to work. We often get asked, I think, who's responsible for your culture? And I think a lot of times as HR professionals, folks might think, okay, you know what, our HR team is responsible for this, or just our people operations function of your business. I believe wholeheartedly that everyone is responsible for your culture. Therefore, every culture is unique, and there's a lovely blend. If everyone in your company and everyone in your healthcare organization is involved in your culture, then it's a beautiful mosaic of personalities, of people that can surely provide a wide range of life to the culture. So we spend a little bit of time, myself and Mike and Matt, looking at different healthcare systems and even hospitals that have strong mission statements, strong core values. Mike's going to talk a little bit about one that really stuck out to us as we were thinking about this presentation. So I'm going to kick it over to him.
Thanks, Jody. We're really glad to have you here. We need to get you on more and more of these. So as Jody mentioned, we believe culture is king, and we really have embraced that since day one of the company. You're going to learn some of the things that we've done as potentially ideas for you, not to say that we're the end all be all, but we like to compare ourselves to our fellow healthcare entities and or clients. Here's one that not only does their mission statement sort of resonate and define who they are, but so much so that our company chose to partner with them. And we actually did a fundraising walk on behalf of St. Jude's in Nashville, raised over $5,000 because people bought into this not only because of what St. Jude's does, and that they don't leave any child behind, and they'll never deny treatment for that, regardless of the ability to pay. That right there is the key focus for their organization, and we could latch onto because we believe making healthcare smarter makes it safer. And so it really tied in personally and emotionally and viscerally. And we think this is the kind of company culture that you would want to have at yours too. Jody, talk a little bit about how we took that and then to define that as not just, as Matt mentioned, safer, smarter healthcare makes safer, but then you turned around and turned that into something internally, which I really love.
Yeah, so when I joined Provider Trust about 2.5 years ago, I was a team of one and had the great privilege of growing the team now to three. And when we first got together as a team of three in our people operations cohort, we decided that we too wanted a mission. We wanted to think about, how do we go about our business serving our clients, which are our people of Provider Trust. And in order to do that, we thought, we love alliteration on the people operations team. So we thought, let's go ahead and create our own mission. And truly, I would encourage each of you, as you think about the work you're doing at your organization, do you have a mission that your HR function lives by, whether that's written down or it's just in your ethos? I think it's a really great thing to have and to consider and to talk about as a team. So ours at Provider Trust here is to extend, engage, and empower our people. We achieve this by igniting a culture of people over process. We want our team members here to feel seen. We want them to feel known. We want them to be recognized and valued. And we really do want to cultivate a place where people can come and feel a sense of belonging.
So I think one of the ways that Jody and her team made this resonate and stick, you can see right here, there are a couple of things that we believe illustrate that, as well as I hope our clients see, and that is that we can be in a really serious business such that we are in healthcare compliance and HR efficiencies. We can also have a lot of fun and show the personalities. We hire really well here because we're intentional about what we're looking for. We're looking for people that have high positivity, high relationship extension, and true to their core values. If you have those three things, we can teach you about healthcare. You don't have to come from the industry. And so to your right here, you see pictures of people from the various different areas within the organization. And we asked them to take a corporate picture, a serious one, and then one that defines who they are. And everyone here, I think, beautifully illustrated the things that mean something to them, whether it's their family, their love for food, that they can do it yourself things. And I learned a lot about people. Jody's going to share something else that we do on Fridays that I think highlight these. But it's nice not only to demonstrate. We put this on our website. When you go to the team picture, you'll see the serious, and if you click through it, the fun picture. But we feel like it's resonated in the industry. We've been very blessed and thankful to have been 5 years in a row one of National Business Journal's fastest growing companies and best places to work. That you don't get awarded just because you exist. You have to earn it. And the surveys come directly to our staff. We don't even see the results from a management perspective, and then they decide whether we illustrate that. Inc. 5000, we've now hit on multiple occasions, and for the first year made Modern Healthcare's best places to work. So we feel like the work that we're doing gets recognized. We don't need those accolades. They're nice to receive. What's more fun is to see the smiles on the faces of the people that you see there to the right. I wanted you to see one of, Matt mentioned one of his favorites, which is to grow and succeed and help others do so, such as what we're trying to do here for you. But my favorite PT value is be the hustle you desire. And it's the hustle you desire. You're here because we know you have it, but it needs to be in your core being. And this is our what we call the cafe. This is our room in the middle of our office where two hallways meet. And this is a sign that's about 6 feet tall that illustrates that. Be the hustle is something that we take very seriously, and we want, as earlier mentioned, we want to be able to allow our employees to be engaged. This allows them to do it and have the freedom to be able to take chances without having the fear of failure. So there's a quote that we thought was very relevant, actually. I guess it makes it smart because it comes from Yale, but it's actually very relevant too, about why culture matters and building a strong one. This comes from Leslie Curry at Yale School of Public Health. We know culture matters, and we can create good culture with little or no cost strategies. It's a matter of the hospital teams wanting to work together from the top down, across all departments and beyond the walls into the community. Take a look back at St. Jude's mission, and this is exactly the purpose of how their culture matters both internally and resonates outside to the communities. Jody, talk a little bit, if you will, about how best you felt communicating that culture works in our organization.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are getting a peek into our secret sauce today. So this is a little bit more of how this lives and breathes within our organization. So I think oftentimes when you're talking about your culture, this lives within orientation or employee onboarding. And while I think that is a critical place for that to live, we truly believe that it's something that has to be practiced day in and day out. Every single day, your values, your mission has to have a life. And so some ways that we do that at Provider Trust is, I'm going to highlight a few here, and then I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into 2 or 3 of them that I think are quite critical. But is to continually emphasize those company values. So we start every single week at Provider Trust with a value leader. That's somebody from each person from a different team coming up each week to speak to one of our 6 core values. And that takes a lot of guts, but it also takes a lot of forethought. And I think it allows the values to really sink in and think about how they can relate to you both personally and professionally. This week alone, we talked about being adventurous, open-minded, and creative. And we talked about ways that we're thinking and acting outside of the box. So those value leader discussions happen every Monday, and then we allow that value to carry over into each of our other morning meetings, of which we have one small huddle every morning, either large or small team. The other thing here is number 2 is ensuring that your leaders are sharing stories. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also believe fully in breaking out into small cross-functional groups. We call these at Provider Trust morning mixers. And this is an opportunity. This happens in more than just our morning meetings, but certainly the one that I think is critical is a morning mixer, a chance to kind of give face and opportunity to the other departments in the organization. We believe in that creating a sense of belonging in creative ways is quite critical. As such, we really value something called a PT talk. A provider trust talk is really, if you can remember back to 2nd and 3rd grade when you had show and tell at your elementary school and you had to bring in your hamster or what have you. We still do that at Provider Trust. It might not be your hamster, it may be your guitar, or gosh, there's just been a million things. I'm trying to think, you guys, of trying to make specialty coffee, backpacking. A wonderful trip that you may have just taken. We use those PT talks every other Friday to create a sense of belonging and to build relationships with people in your office. And truly, it is one of my favorite aspects of our culture. Moving on down, promoting interoperability and sourcing ideas from every department. This is a trend that certainly is happening in healthcare as we're moving patient data from one source to another. That's something equally that we're constantly talking about at Provider Trust. How can we avoid being siloed and work together as a strong, cohesive team? And then lastly, and I'll dig into this one a little bit more, is establishing hiring best practices as it relates to your culture. So we do want to dig into 2 of those, as I mentioned. One of them being this notion of folklore and storytelling. I believe this is paramount. Stories stick, ultimately, you've got to continually look for new stories. You've got to repeat old ones. And it's really critical that you create platforms for that. I mentioned in our value leader, we do that value leader every week, but we've purposefully rotated one of our managing partners. Every 4th week, we have one of our 3 managing partners be a value leader. And the point of that is, one, certainly to get our leaders exposure to our company and for each of our employees to hear from them, but also to allow them to share the stories that both created Provider Trust and continue to make Provider Trust today a great place to be. I loved this quote from Larry Sternberg. Larry is a Talent Plus fellow, and he sits on the board at Talent Plus. Talent Plus is an organization that we've partnered with for many years as we've looked at our hiring best practices. And Larry says here, every human being is an unconscious cultural anthropologist. New employees learn the most about culture through daily observation. They hear the stories, They watch other people work. Every single day, they learn what's being celebrated in your organization and what's being rewarded, as well as what's getting punished and what's getting ignored. So I think this notion of folklore and storytelling is just critical, and I hope that you guys can all find avenues for this. I asked Mike, I said, Mike, would you be so kind? Mike is like the king of all storytelling, so it's quite hard for him to probably narrow down to just one, but I wanted Mike to share perhaps one of the folklores that he's got in his mind that he could share with y'all that's really championed our culture.
And so for those of you who know me, I came up with 4. But I'll make them brief. And actually, when they asked me about storytelling, these happen to be actually true. One that came to mind first was when we first started doing more elaborate Thanksgiving Day lunches here for the company as we grew from 4 to over 85 people. One of the things that we started about 2, 3 years ago was writing a thank you note to somebody in the organization that meant or did something special for you. And I have every one that's ever been written to me, and I value them. They're actually in a folder that I keep and remind myself when I'm wondering, am I doing the right thing? Am I impacting this company? So little things like that go a long way. We also believe really strongly that people should leave well. People come and go through our organization for various reasons. They move, they get career advancements other places, or maybe they're not really the fit at the end of the day. Regardless of what those are, we're very intentional about people leaving well. And one of the ideas that one of our staff came up with for somebody that was leaving was to have a circle of sharing compliments. And that was something that I think surprised the individual who was leaving. And they were very tearful about it because it was a struggle for them to choose to leave. It was an opportunity for them to do so in advance, but everyone went around the circle and gave a compliment about that person. Another idea that I think shares the way you can live out your culture, we just moved to a new office space in downtown Nashville, which we're really pleased about. It's a really nice improvement for us. And we looked at what are we going to do for putting art on the walls. And the People Ops team came forward and said, we're going to have a painting party. You don't have to have any skill, and anything is allowed. Those paintings are now sitting on the various parts of the office and really kind of, they're beautiful, but they also show the value of bringing things into the organization from your own staff. And then lastly, well, you know you've arrived when you have you're doing something right when one of your teammates, your verifiers that work on verifying information for us, has a child and names their child Dale Chris after the 2 department heads that they work with. Literally named their child after the department heads here, and that's a true story. So there you go. There's culture at its best.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. Another component of communicating that cultural vision is making sure that you establish great hiring practices. And so, as I mentioned before, we do partner with Talent Plus, and they've been a dear partner to us over the last 9 years. Another thing that we've really started to talk a lot more about at PT, and I think just largely in the HR industry, is this shift of thinking, this notion of no longer are we looking for culture fits, but that we're looking for culture adds. People that not only are going to value the company's standards, but they're also going to bring an aspect of diversity that positively contributes to the organization. When you're looking simply for culture fits, you're actually creating quite a homogenous workplace. And so, particular to us, I loved this article, and we've included the link here to it. But particularly for us, as a tech company, innovation is so critical. And Delisa Alexander, she's the head of people, chief officer over at Red Hat, and she says this in this article: diversity is the opposite of sameness, and sameness is the enemy of innovation. And yeah, as I mentioned, Provider Trust is a tech company, but truly in each and every workplace, innovation is so critical for growth. It's critical for meeting customer needs or patient needs. it's critical for attracting talent and critical for standing apart from competition. So I would challenge each of you to think a little bit more as you're going into your hiring practices about what it would look like to add, what a culture ad could look like as you think about that beautiful mosaic of your company and organization. I thought this comic here, we're big fans of Adam Grant at Provider Trust. In fact, we have a book club that we started about 2 years ago, and the first book that we read for that book club was Adam Grant's Give and Take, and I truly recommend it to each of you to give a peek. It talks about givers, takers in an organization, but we loved this comic that talks really more about this notion of adding to your culture through your hiring practices.
All right, so as we round out our agenda today, we're going to now focus on engagement and retention. We know that culture is really critical, but it's not the only thing that you as HR professionals are tasked to do and need to cultivate within your organization. It's very expensive to hire, it's very time consuming, and a lot of intentionality goes into it. So engaging and retaining obviously is top of mind. We did a little statistics studies and found one that we thought was relevant for today. What HR comes from the future of HR from Paycor, and they did a survey to find that HR managers worry about the following. Obviously, recruiting and retention is number one here. It's almost 50% of on the minds of HR professionals. But then you have them here. Developing talent is really important for you. There's an old saying that somebody says, what happens if people leave and what are we going to do with the talent? And the CFO says, what happens or the head of HR says, what if they stay but they don't have the talent, right? So the difference between the dollars and cents it takes to get people there and then the development of that person for their career development. Number three, developing skills gap. Obviously, things in healthcare change all the time, and therefore the need for improving your skills is a constant. Managing workplace conflict. If you haven't embraced conflict, you need to, and we're going to talk a little about it later. But conflict, it can be a good thing. It can be that you're trying to push and innovate and do things and grow, and it may put people out of their comfort zone. Now, that being said, there needs to be the trust within the workforce that is going to be dealt with in a fair and equitable manner, and therefore conflict can be a good thing. And then lastly, managing the multi-generational workforce. We're not going to get into millennials versus X versus Y and Gen things, but we have a group that I think Jody's going to highlight later that, retiring baby boomers are moving out of the workforce, and now you have a whole bunch of different issues that you're facing with. So high turnover in healthcare, obviously I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. There's a great article that we found here that we think is important. I came out of the background screening industry before Provider Trust, was part of founding a background screening company, a large background screening company. And I know that on the pre-hire side, back from the 90s to 2000 when I was in that business, in the long-term care sector alone, turnover can be for these hourly jobs 85 to 100+%, which means statistically nobody's going to be there next year. That's really tough. Hopefully you're not in that, but what can you be doing to reduce that? Well, hospital turnover rates through this study continued to increase, and the average turnover rate in 2018 was 19%. Maybe that's a benchmark you can use to see how your organization's doing. Are you beating that? Are you sort of in the mix there? Or are you higher than that? The cost of losing a bedside nurse is calculated in the study to be almost over $50,000. I mean, you calculate that by the turnover rate, that could cost your organization $4 to $7 million a year in lost productivity or revenue. Younger employees, they found in this survey, want a more fulfilling experience when it comes to training, career advancement, and benefits. They're not just wanting to check the box. They really want to understand how this makes their job easier and them more effective. And then lastly, company culture or job expectations can be misrepresented or poorly communicated upon hire. leaving providers confused and frustrated. And so setting the bar from the very first day that they come to your workplace is important for getting it right going forward. This will help avoid burnout, and it's a real thing. I know you guys are faced with this on a daily basis. In 2015, the Mayo Clinic found that more than half of American physicians, let's focus just on the physician market here, have had at least a sign of burnout. That's a almost 10% increase over the prior 3 years. Burnout is based on stress. It can be based on a number of factors, but fatigue, detachment, these are things that hopefully you're able to spot and see and help avoid, so you don't turn into somebody that either doesn't care or makes a costly mistake, including malpractice, to bring the hospital into litigation. You know, burnout is viewed as a threat to patient safety because people who don't then therefore appear to care, the patient lacks the trust on that individual and maybe their decision-making ability. And many times providers feel that their work-life balance is hard to manage given all the scheduling requirements. So there's a lot of factors that come at this, but your culture can overcome this if you do this right. So Matt, why don't we do a poll question here? And
yeah, so we have 2 polls today. This is the first one, and again, appreciate you contributing to this poll. And we just want, really, the point of these is so we can all get a feel for what our peers are thinking and feeling. So our first question here is, how often does your organization send out an employee survey? I know Jody will touch on ours, but ours is pretty consistent here, and I know a lot of great feedback comes from those. But we just want, we're going to leave this open for about 10 more seconds just to let everybody get a chance to submit. But we're just curious, where does your organization stand with this? Okay, we'll close that out and share the results.
Okay, so great. So it looks like here we have 58% of you all are doing an annual employee survey. That is kind of the number that I suspected would be the case. The annual survey would be the most common. And certainly that's the world that Provider Trust was living in for many years. The past year, however, we have really started to talk, we've started to actually activate a weekly survey, believe it or not. So every week at Provider Trust, we've now instituted what we call the weekly pulse check. And I think this is a critical component to, again, our culture and ensuring that we have a touch point with each of our employees on a weekly basis. It's a very light touch. We do not need a robust system to enact this pulse. In fact, we just use Google Forms, which is a free platform. You can do this, of course, widely across your healthcare organization. You can also do this internally with your team, your small HR team or compliance team. But we're firm believers in this pulse check. As I mentioned, it's quick, it's easy, it takes no more than 2 minutes to fill out. We measure both participation, company-wide participation, as well as team participation. We also measure productivity and engagement within that survey. And then we also ask 2 open-ended questions that are tied to our Provider Trust engagement drivers. And really, the next kind of 30 minutes of this presentation is really going to key into those engagement drivers. I believe the engagement drivers are what helps set Provider Trust apart and really addresses all of the issues that you can see in an organization that Mike just talked about: burnout, fatigue, etc.
Can I add, Jody, one of the things that I love about this pulse check is that from a management level and as owners that are managing this company too, we really look at these. I mean, we spend the time to go through. They're anonymous. We don't know who submitted it except for what department they were in. And it has everything from a score, a numerical score about how engaged they felt that week, how did they get their big rock done, and then a specific question that rotates each week that we may be asking them. And in turn, we have now implemented in our monthly company meeting, which we do on a monthly basis with our staff. We review our financials, where we're going. We have different presentations. We actually pull 3 or 4 of the pros and cons that we receive, saying, here's a question that we got, and it's a great one, and here's a complaint that we got. I mean, it's really relevant. And so I hope that our staff realizes we're taking this seriously. We're actually making changes as a result of them, and that this pulse matters. So you might, embrace that as you consider rolling this out too.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a great addition. So looking at those provider trust engagement drivers, for us, as I mentioned, we have 8. Meaningful work, autonomy, recognition, career growth, employee wellness, supportive management, trust and leadership, and relationships. And so each week in the Pulse Check, we actually take 2 questions out of each category here, each of these drivers, and we relate that question directly back to that engagement driver. So I want to spend a little bit of time just talking through each of those. Our first one is purpose alignment and meaningful work. I think it's critical that your work that you are doing every day matters. If you're feeling that the work and the projects that you are working on is not helping move the needle, you are going to quickly fall into fatigue and disengagement. So ways that we try to align meaningful work at Provider Trust is we have a quarterly review cycle. We have those quarterly check-ins, as we call them, every quarter. We talk about our professional and our personal goals for that quarter, and then we look for ways to tie them back to our mission, back to our strategic growth plan. And as a fast, agile company, we're moving in sprints every 90 days. Every 90 days, we should be able to move a project along. And so that's something that's been real successful for us, a model that has allowed us to have more touch points than simply an annual performance review. And it's really allowed us to have great, meaningful work conversations. Our second engagement driver is that of autonomy. Provider Trust encourages employees to embody a lead yourself mentality. It's one of our core business practices. We have 6 core values, and then we also have 6 core business practices. And one of them is this notion of leading yourself. So oftentimes when we talk about curating Folklore, you will hear Chris Redditch, co-founder, and Mike Rosen, co-founders, talking about failing fast. We're not afraid to break stuff at Provider Trust. And we also, particularly in our sales environment, we want people that are going to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. I recognize that this type of ownership and autonomy may not translate into the healthcare space. Some of this notion of failing fast or asking for forgiveness might not be where autonomy and ownership lives for you guys. However, I think that autonomy and ownership in the healthcare space can look like getting software solutions that you can easily schedule appointments, getting automated tools for lengthy tasks to focus more on people and special projects, allowing team members to have a more flexible schedule. This was something that Mike just mentioned relative to burnout. The hours that you are pouring into your work, specifically at Provider Trust, we have an unlimited PTO policy. We really truly champion a work-life balance. So are there ways and means that you could provide your employees and team members a flexible schedule? And then lastly, how is your healthcare employee gaining autonomy over total patient care? I think that's a really critical component to autonomy and ownership, as well as do your employees have the power to make the decisions relative to the patient and the next of kin for that patient? Our third one is recognition and praise, and I absolutely love this. This is a huge engagement driver for us at PT. We do this in many, many ways. I'm going to highlight a couple for you guys right now. We have 2 software solutions that we champion at Provider Trust. One is Slack. It's our company-wide communication portal, and it has been it's a great platform. It really gets us out of email and into a more agile communication tool for us. And so you'll see on the left-hand side a picture of our PT praise Slack channel, and this is a place where we just dump praises to each other all the time. There's a rare day at Provider Trust that a PT praise doesn't hit that Slack channel. Another way that we do recognition and praise at Provider Trust is we have each employee during our onboarding fill out an appreciation survey. I would absolutely recommend that being something you slot into your orientation regimen. It's a very easy, light touch scenario because you know what, at the end of the day, not everyone wants to be recognized in the same way. In fact, public recognition for some folks is the last thing that they want. And so we've really used this appreciation survey to get to know our people, who is our population, and how can we best appreciate and reward them. Mike mentioned our all hands meeting that we have every month. We also do, as I mentioned, we do appreciate those that want to be, they want the nod of the cap. We do like to also acknowledge at the end of each of our all company meetings, we'll do a PT praise, which is an opportunity again for us to acknowledge our peers in a space that all can hear and see. So those are just some quick ways in which we do that, but it is a critical component of what drives our engagement. Number 4, and this is a big one, this is our career and our professional growth. So slide 22, earlier we were talking about what HR managers worry about the most. The second most important item for that was talent development. Are you developing your talent? Ways in which we are doing this at Provider Trust, and we'll talk about towards the end of this presentation, is professional development plans. We're getting ready to kick off professional development plans at Provider Trust. But here are some other ways, and certainly these are some of the things that I would bet many of your organizations are doing today. Those career advancement programs, tuition reimbursement for continuing education. My mother's a nurse and she's an oncology nurse, and her oncology certification has allowed her to have a little bit more pay in her healthcare system. Focus groups, advisory boards, and internal committees, I think these are critical. I believe this is an awesome opportunity for folks to be able to find themselves in leadership positions that they may not otherwise find on their internal team. I also believe these are critical for cross-department dialogue and exposure. Talking about my mom here again, she sits on the medical ethics committee and she absolutely loves that committee. It gives her a chance to meet new faces, new people, and to even think differently about the work that she's doing day in and day out. And it's provided her quite a bit of professional growth. Continuing education and training, ensuring that you know what are the things, and as I mentioned, we'll finish this presentation on these professional development plans, but do you know the training and the education that your workforce is hungry for? Number 5 for us is employee wellness. We have an employee experience manager here that sits on our people operations team, and she has done a tremendous job in the last year of cultivating a healthier Provider Trust. She went so far as to create our wellness program, which is called our Thrive 365. The mission of that Thrive 365 program is a holistic approach to wellness that encourages the Provider Trust team to make healthy life decisions and build habits that positively impact them professionally and personally. We ended up doing, as we kicked off this program this past year, we actually did a Move Your Body Week at Provider Trust, and we just had a blast. This is a photo here of some of our team members. We partnered with a local gym in the area that has provided us a gym member discount. And we carved out classes throughout the entire week that our people could scoot over to. This gym is quite close to our office, and it was just a wonderful week. We also had some classes right here in our office, and it just really paved the way for us to champion the wellness component of our business. One thing I wanted to mention on this for you all is your workplace design. That directly ties to employee wellness. Do you have ergonomic desks? Do you have a means to set up your workspace in a way that your employees can feel they can feel better, they can feel healthier, they can feel that they can move about, that they're not contained to just one space, and do they have the means to do exercise in the workspace as well? So these are some of the items that we've also laid the groundwork for at Provider Trust. We have healthy food options here in our cafeteria. We offer we started a fitness stipend this coming month that we're very excited to celebrate. And certainly stress management. That is another area. We did a wellness survey tied to this Thrive 365 program, and we were surprised to find that the stress management was one of the #1 components of our people and their wellness today. And so for the back half of the year, our team is going to really make a push to address that. We've started conflict resolution seminars. We're going to start doing some on-site massages to all of the PT employees that are listening. They are privy now to one of our people ops secrets, but I think some of that can go a really, really long way in developing a healthy culture. Supportive management is our 6th engagement driver, and we ask our team members in our weekly pulse every month about how supportive is their management. As Mike mentioned, high positivity is a really critical component that we recruit for here at Provider Trust. And so with our management, we encourage each of our directors to lead weekly team meetings. We're big promoters of scheduling one-to-ones with each of those team members. We encourage our managers to have 100% team participation in our weekly pulse. And we also encourage them to do 100% of their quarterly reviews with their team members. And lastly, when those big rocks are accomplished, when you see our marketing team, if you haven't checked out our new website, please do so. Our marketing team worked so hard the first half of this year to revamp our website, and it's just an opportunity to really celebrate the great work that your teams are moving about. Can you find a means to budget for some team celebrations? I think that goes so far in the great work that folks are doing. Our 7th engagement driver is that of trust and leadership, and it's an honor to work at Provider Trust and have both Chris, Andrew, and Mike as our managing partners. I believe this is a critical component to engagement. Some of the items that are tied to this is the transparency, vulnerability, and communication. So what I love about our leadership team at Provider Trust is that they are accessible, that they're honest with their stories, they're transparent about the things that are moving around the business and organization. We hear from them on a monthly basis in our all company meetings. As Mike mentioned, we talk about the weekly pulse. We review. We just started. This is a new trend, and I envision it'll carry through for years to come. We review and discuss the feedback from the pulse. So we're actually seeing those items move and have action. So often we fill out surveys and then we never see the change happen. And when you think about that annual survey, you're getting that data, and then the time it takes for you to turn over that data is just too long, and people burn out. They're tired of waiting. And so I've been so pleased with our leadership team that has said, you know what, we're going to take this data weekly and we're going to make it a priority. They're also quite accessible. So as I mentioned, we have an open office structure. They have calendar transparency. You know where our leaders are at all times. And I think that as an employee at Provider Trust, that gives you a real sense of safety that is critical.
Including when I get a haircut.
Exactly. Our last and final engagement driver is that of relationships. So we're big on relationships at Provider Trust. It's so critical to me as a people operations director that our folks are feeling that they have friendships here, that this is a safe place for them to cultivate friendships and relationships. And we also have psychological safety as another component. Mike talked about this notion of not being afraid to fail. And I think that is a critical component of feeling that you can bring your best ideas to work, and it's okay if you make mistakes, that we're a culture that embraces that mentality. Final two components of relationships for us is conflict resolution. So we have a conflict resolution policy at Provider Trust. We were going to share it here on the deck, but we could maybe sneak it in here in a moment. as when Matt sends it out. But essentially, our conflict resolution is that within 24 to 48 hours of the conflict happening, is that you address that person, that you do your best to not let things fester, and that you really take the time, the energy, and the effort to engage in that conflict. So often, I think we're taught societally that, we want to avoid conflict, or we try to avoid conflict, and that is just not the PT way. Provider Trust is big on conflict. We're doing 4 conflict seminars this past year that have really helped us think differently about conflict and how healthy it is in your workplace. And then lastly, your social engagement and your volunteer opportunities. These are some pictures of things that we've done as an organization, races. We went roller skating this year, and we volunteered over at Second Harvest, and all that just goes so far in having an engaged population.
Good, thanks, Jody. This will be our last poll of the day, and then we'll wrap up here today over the next 10 minutes. But we're just curious. I know we have to work daily to overcome our cultural roadblocks, and a lot of that has to do with the hard work that Jody and her team put in to Provider Trust. And so we're just curious of where we've seen several roadblocks, and we're curious of where yours might be. If you do choose other in this option, we would love to know. If you feel like sharing, we'd love to know. Just chime in on the questions tab in your control panel. And we're curious of that too. So
I'll leave this open for about 5 more seconds. And all right, let's close it out and see what we got here. So this one's a fascinating one. We really didn't know what to anticipate. The group that you're participating with today, about a third, interestingly, thinks that leadership buy-in is a roadblock. Maybe that they're not willing to walk the walk and talk the talk. So of course, that has to occur for this to have any stickiness. Really, they're otherwise just words on paper. So I feel for you if that's the case, and I would challenge you to try to lead that and maybe bring some best practice. Hopefully, some of the things you learned here today you're welcome to use and suggest at your own organization. Mergers and acquisitions. So glad that that's not a roadblock. Either you're not having them or you've had good luck with them. That sometimes is something that really creates a bunch of conflict and detraction. Here, it doesn't seem to be an issue, but motivating your employees to get it done and to spend the time to do it and embrace it, that is part of what it takes. And I mean, Jody's team is 3 people strong, and we're an 85-person company. So, I mean, you got to make the investment to really make it work, or it really just is words on paper. So I feel for you there. Company growth and scalability, obviously that can play a factor too. So thank you for that. I think it's important for you to see what your compatriots are also worried about. Jody, on the remaining few minutes, why don't we talk about roadmaps for professional development, because that's key, and then we'll do some key takeaways, and if there's any questions, go through those.
Perfect. So as I mentioned earlier, these professional development plans are something that we are actually kicking off here in our the start of the 4th quarter. And the way that we're building those out is first and foremost just simply defining our career goals. In our quarterly reviews, we talk about professional goals and personal goals for the quarter, but we want to think a little bit longer term now. So things that we're considering with defining the career goals is, what are the short-term goals of your people, 1 to 3 years, and then equally, what are the long-term goals? The second component of these professional development plans is just to simply take inventory of where our employees and team members are today. What are the baseline skills that need to be in place for them to have that baseline skill acquisition, and then equally, what are the proficiencies that are needed, and then lastly, how can someone become a master within their role? And so we really want to spend some time taking inventory of identifying those development areas, prioritizing those development areas, and then figuring out ways to analyze performance. How are you going to get there? So setting up, defining those action plans for provider trust. I think we're going to take an approach that we're calling the 70-20-10 approach. And some of you may be aware of what that is, or have seen that approach, but it's this understanding that 70% of our growth is actually going to come from our experience, from the on-the-job activities that we get exposure to. 20% of that approach is going to be exposure, relationships and feedback, training and education. And then 10% of that is going to be exploration. We started something in our development team this year that was called Take 10. And it was take 10% of your time to explore a new project or a new entity, a new area of expertise that you'd like to dip your toe into. And that's, I think, something that we're going to adopt across our whole organization is with 10% of your time, what's something new you want to explore? And then the last components to figure out there is, what is the support that your people are going to need to accomplish this? That goes back to that slide on career development. And then lastly, measuring this success, making sure that you have the metrics in place to drive that data through and see your people on to the next phase, whether that's at provider trust or, launching them into their next great opportunity. I as part of this segment as well, I wanted to share just even a personal anecdote. My mom is a nurse of 33 years, and she's part of that baby boomer generation that Mike talked about. And I know for many of you have that nurse population or that healthcare population that has served in their role for many years. And I think this knowledge transfer, this succession planning is critical. My mom believes that she's going to break the record for the oldest working nurse. So in her mind, she still has 30 years to go. But she really has started, she started really embracing this notion of knowledge transfer and how she can be, as a subject matter expert, an assistant, a mentor, a coach to some of the newer nurses on her floor. And it's something that you've really got to carve out to do. You've got to put a program in place to do this, because otherwise, you all know, we get busy, but before we know it, we have these folks that are exiting the organization, and there is a knowledge gap. And so as you're thinking about those professional development plans, I highly encourage you to also think about mentorships. And I know it's something that my mom's really championed in her nursing career, or rather the kind of final lap of her nursing career. And I think it's a great component for y'all to think about with regards to sustainability and developing professionals.
And I think hearing that story, we could all agree that's the kind of employee you want. That shows the culture, whether it's embraced and you're one of the poll people that said my leadership doesn't embrace it, or I don't think it's going to stick. You still have people like Miss Murphy who will do that on their own, and that's what you need more of. You want that to drive the culture of your organization. All right, we've got a minute to wrap up. First of all, Judy, thank you. I think it was immeasurable. I'm glad this was your first one. It certainly won't be your last. I hope for those of you on the call, you found this very helpful. And we don't, have secrets here. We want to share with you what it works here. It may not work for you. Some of these are because we're a smaller organization, and you may be a more an organization that doesn't move as fast. But there's some nuggets in here I think you can take away. Everyone has to own this. It's not just your responsibility. You need to champion it, but everybody has to embrace it. Stories really matter, and they help make this more of an opportunity to be successful. The culture adds is a word and phrase that Jody came up with. I love it. I think it's exactly right, because if you have those ambassadors, the Miss Murphys of the world, Nurse Murphys, that's going to really help make your job easier. You got to make the investment and really set out a clear roadmap. But consistency is what matters. At the end of the day, if you're willing to be consistent about it, people will jump on board with you. So with that, we want to open up to any questions. If you have any, please put them into the text box, and we'll try to get to them. At the same time, we want to thank you for being here and let you know that we have some resources. Matt, why don't you share what those are?
Yeah, and for the sake of time here, I know it's almost 1 o'clock, and we really do value you all being here with us. So if you do submit a question, we will get to it offline and be sure to respond to you as soon as possible. But thank you again. We are so grateful for you to spend your time with us. We value what you do at your organization, and we know what you do is important. And we really care. So thanks again. And what I do want to share here at the end is that you will receive a copy of the slides as well as a recording. And again, that pending CEU certificate will come through as soon as I receive it. And please ask any questions that you may have. Mike and Jody, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you again for joining us. And we hope to see you next month. Hope you all have a great rest of the week.